All right, Derbyites, welcome back to our viewing panels. This time we are doing the mini movie series race for lead actor. This is a good one. So we have two nominees from Fargo, Billy Bob Thornton and Mark Ruffalo, and then and Martin Freeman. And then Mark Ruffalo is for The Normal Heart, of course. And then Benedict Cumberbatch is in for Sherlock, His Last Vow. Chiwetel Ejiofor is in for Dancing on the Edge, and Idris Elba for Luther. So I'll just start with my list this time. I have Billy Bob in first place. I think he is incredible in this, and if they watch the whole thing from beginning to end, he really has a great arc. Martin Freeman is my personal choice because I liked him the best, but I actually have him in third place. I have Mark Ruffalo in between them in second. And then fourth, I have Benedict Cumberbatch. Fifth is Ejiofor, and sixth is Idris Elba. Daniel, what is your order?
I've got Billy Bob Thornton in first place, and this is tough. I think my top three are really close. I might switch them up at some point. Number two, I've got Mark Ruffalo. Three, I've got Martin Freeman, even though I agree he would be my personal choice. Then I've got Benedict Cumberbatch in fourth, Idris Elba in fifth, and Chiwetel Ejiofor in sixth.
And Riley.
Yeah, we all have very similar lists. I'm Thornton, Freeman, Ruffalo, Cumberbatch, Ejiofor, and Elba.
Why do we all have Elba down at the bottom? I mean, he won a Golden Globe for this just 2 years ago, so he does have support out there. Is it just because he's kind of old news at this point? I mean, Luther comes back year after year. It competes in the miniseries race because it doesn't have enough episodes. It needs 6, and what it only has like 4 or 5, right?
Yeah, 4.
Yeah.
Right. So is it just old news at this point? Do the Emmy voters want to give this to maybe somebody more famous? I mean, we were just looking at the list of who's won this in the past, and it is movie star after movie star after movie star after Barry Pepper.
Yeah, I think Luther is a little bit old news. It was sort of a surprise that it not only got in for Idris Elba, but it got into best miniseries, and it got into, I think, writing and directing, or at least one of those. So that was more support than I was expecting overall. But this is a field where you've got these buzzworthy performances up at the top, and you know. The heat off of Luther isn't what it used to be, which is, you know, not necessarily a deal breaker. You know, as I mentioned in another Slugfest, Laura Linney won for The Big C long after anyone was talking about The Big C last year. So, you know, you never know, and it is a showy performance. But you know, it's not so much that he's weak, so much as, you know, there's reason to believe everyone else is that much stronger.
I think in past years, Idris Elba has kind of had a better chance, particularly for the second season, when he's coming off of his Globe win and he was nominated for directing. This year, Luther's not nominated for directing; it's only up for writing. It kind of went out with a whimper. Like, it's not coming back for another season, but it wasn't because it was. Well, it's hard to tell if it was canceled or what, because they say they want to bring it back for a future film, or maybe they'll do a spin-off. And the critical acclaim has also been like steadily declining on Metacritic, let's say. So I think he's had better chances in the past.
And then Chiwetel Ejiofor, he's a recent Oscar nominee for 12 Years a Slave. But he's in our 5th or 6th positions. I actually watched all of Dancing on the Edge, and it just wasn't. It didn't engage me for some reason. It was one of my also rants of the year. I guess something that I kind of forgot that I even watched. But he was okay in it. I think Matthew Good kind of outperformed him, and he wasn't even nominated here. And John Goodman also was really good in that as well. But what did you guys think of Ejiofor? Do you think his Oscar nomination could maybe help him? Are we ranking him too low?
I think Chiwetel Ejiofor earned an Emmy nomination for earning an Oscar nomination. I think that's kind of what happened. And no offense to him, I would have given him the Oscar for 12 Years a Slave personally, and I'm glad he's got this increased notoriety. But it's sort of telling in the sense that he's the only nominee for Dancing on the Edge. So voters, you know, either weren't much attention to the film or weren't that really struck by the film or the miniseries. And so it feels very much like, you know, he's on that hot streak where suddenly his name pops up on a ballot and you see it and you're like, I really loved him in 12 Years a Slave. I bet he's good in this. That's, you know, that's the sort of thing that might have happened with him. And I don't think that's going to be enough for him to win in this field.
Yeah, Dancing on the Edge, it seemed to have some heat from the Golden Globes. You know, it did pretty well in the nominations there. It also got that notorious win by Jackson Bisset. I thought at the very least it would get some kind of, I don't know, sound mixing nomination because it has music in it. But yeah, he is the only nomination for Dancing on the Edge. And if you say that, you know, he's outperformed by Matthew Good, then maybe I should move him into 6th.
Yeah. You know, if True Detective had gone into mini movie series, this race would be one for the record books because we would have Matthew McConaughey and Woody Harrelson in here against the Fargo guys, against Cumberbatch, against Ruffalo. It would be one of the craziest categories ever. But HBO decided to move it to drama series, which is a discussion for another day. But I actually have in my 4th place, I have Cumberbatch. I know you, Daniel, you're a huge Sherlock fan. Do you think he's just kind of outperformed by the Fargo guys, by Ruffalo?
I wouldn't
Or
say
he doesn't have enough buzz?
I think it's the buzz. You know, he doesn't have, like, the last time he was nominated, Sherlock had taken such a huge leap from its first run at the Emmys for Study in Pink to then Scandal in Belgravia. It went from 4 nominations to 13, and it got its actors in. It got you know best movie. It got everything that wasn't nailed down. It was nominated for. Completely shut out. This year, there's not as much buzz for him. There, you know, since you got these anthologies coming in like Fargo, there's so much more attention and acclaim going to them. And then, you know, he has a great speech. Unfortunately, it's in the 2nd episode of the season, The Sign of 3, which voters will not be considering in this race. They'll be considering the 3rd and final episode of the season, his final vow, which he's good in, but you know, in this case, again, the same performance against a different field might have a chance, but this year, I think he's on the outside looking in.
You know, why is this? We talked about this in emails a little bit, but Riley, why is Sherlock not considered a miniseries? They have 3 episodes. Each one is double length, so really it could be a drama series. It has enough to submit for drama. But it's not drama. It's not even a miniseries. It's a movie. What are they doing? And is this going to hurt their chances?
Yeah, I have no idea. I mean, back when movie and mini were combined and they would only submit 1 episode, then you're like, oh, that's kind of weird, but it doesn't really affect the nominations. Whereas now they're actually getting nominated as a movie when obviously they're a miniseries because they produce multiple movies per year. And like you say, they do produce the equivalent of 6 episodes. So, like, I would like them to compete for a drama series. I'm not sure what's happening. The only thing I see is that it's disadvantaging them in the acting races where Martin Freeman or Benedict Cumberbatch might have a better opportunity if they're able to be seen in another episode. It might be helping them in some category like writing, maybe if they only submit their best episode. This 3rd season in particular was not as well received as the last season. Then maybe they can pull off an upset there. But something needs to be done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Daniel, you were saying how the 3rd one, the one that actually the Emmy voters will judge on, it's not as self-contained as the ones they've entered in the past, right?
No, it's not really self-contained at all, really. It has its own mystery, but it connects so much back to the first 2 episodes. And this is the first time they're submitting a 3rd episode. The last 2 years, they submitted the first episode of the season, so even if they didn't end on a perfect resolution, that case got resolved, and you're not building up as much off of previous developments in previous episodes. This season was the most serialized, I think, so far. And a lot of the events, the most dramatic events in that 3rd episode are dependent on things that happened in the first 2. So I really think, I don't think they would have had a chance to win Best Miniseries if they'd gone over there. Fargo's too strong. And I don't think they'll win against Normal Heart for Best TV Movie, but I really think they could have given their actors a better shot if they submitted the entire thing so voters could get to see the entire arc instead of having to judge just 1/3 of the story.
And I actually love how in this category we have Cumberbatch for Sherlock going against Martin Freeman for Fargo. Even though they're really both lead on Sherlock, I'm sorry, but they are. But of course Freeman goes into the supporting category for Sherlock, but he's up here for Fargo. So let's talk about him. We kind of mentioned that he's our favorite performance on Fargo, but why are we not predicting him to win if he's our favorite, Daniel?
He doesn't have the star power of Billy Bob Thornton and Mark Ruffalo, and I think that does matter, especially if he's going head to head against Billy Bob Thornton, who has that cool factor. He has an Oscar. He's a respected film actor doing TV. Emmy voters love film actors who do TV. So I do think I'm wary of him. I think because as we mentioned before, Barry Pepper won against his much more famous co-star Greg Kinnear, and he didn't even have the benefit of Sherlock. Martin Freeman really sort of has two performances in this category for the price of one, because if voters are watching everything, they're watching him in Sherlock and Fargo, and they're not only seeing two performances, they're seeing two so different performances. It barely seems like the same actor, and that's I think he could get some votes over Thornton, from people who admire his versatility and people like us who just like that performance the most of all, because Thornton that's a very quiet, cool, subtle performance. So it's not typical kind you'd expect to win.
Yeah, Riley, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, for me it all comes down to the new voting system that they have in place this year for the movie mini acting categories, whereas previously they would rank the contenders. This year they rate them. I think Billy Bob Thornton, he has kind of a two-dimensional character compared to Martin Freeman. He kind of, comes in, says his one line about how he found a foot in a toaster or something. He acts cool. He's pretty quiet. Like, there's not a lot to criticize there. He makes, good choices with the material that he has, and I don't think that if people are going to be rating that performance on like a scale of 5, he's not going to get anybody upset with his performance, and he's not going to have a low score dragging his average down. I think Martin Freeman, he had the opportunity to make more interesting choices than Billy Bob Thornton, and I think your mileage varies on whether he followed through on that or not. I mean, I found his accent kind of shaky at times. I'm not as big a fan of his performance as you guys. I think that a performance like his that's more divisive will not be able to beat something that's just a consensus favorite.
I feel like if one voting group would have given Freeman the trophy, it would have been the critics, because the critics are always on what's hot and cool, and Martin Freeman is one of the coolest guys. I mean, Sherlock, yes, and Fargo, yes, but also the Hobbit movies. I mean, come on. And when they gave it to Billy Bob Thornton, that's when I changed my prediction to Thornton, because if even the critics are going to give it to this guy, I think that's telling. And I know the Critics' Choice Awards is really not that good of a predictor for the Emmys, but I think in this category it might be. And as for Thornton, if the voters only watch, let's say, the first DVD, and let's say there's four episodes on that first DVD, the fourth one is the one where he gets arrested and where he pretends to be a reverend from another town, and he puts on these fake glasses, he does a fake accent. So in that episode in particular, he's playing two different versions of himself. And that was really the episode me and Ralph, Gold Derby editor Ralph, were talking about how that could win it for him because it's so good. And whereas Freeman kind of plays the crazy guy, the guy that's off kilter a little bit, and he plays that same thing from beginning to end. In this one episode, Thornton has two different versions of himself. That's really, really great. And Emmy voters love that kind of stuff. So over the past few years, we've noticed that whenever two actors from the same movie or miniseries get nominated, one of them usually wins. Last year we had Michael Douglas and Matt Damon for Behind the Candelabra. Douglas won. The year before that we had Kevin Costner and we had Bill Paxton for Hatfields and McCoys, and Kevin Costner won. The year before that it was Barry Pepper and Greg Kinnear for the Kennedys, and Barry Pepper won. So this interesting pattern that's come out, whenever there's two actors from the same movie, one of them wins. It's usually the one that's the more famous name, actually, except for the Barry Pepper incident, but that was just crazy. So if that's the case, will it be one of these Fargo guys, or could Ruffalo get in there? Daniel?
Yeah, I think Ruffalo could win. He has the benefit of something Thornton and Freeman doesn't have, which is the big grandstanding speeches. And he not only has big grandstanding speeches, like we talked about this during the supporting actor Slugfest, how Joe Mantello has a big speech and Jim Parsons has a speech. Mark Ruffalo's performance from beginning to end is basically a sequence of indignant speeches. And it's not my favorite performance in the film. I liked this characterization better in the film than I did on stage. I thought it was a little more strident on stage, but that might have just been the venue. But he has it's a big political issue. It's it's an important subject matter. It's big speeches like the kind Jeff Daniels was giving last year, the kind James Spader gave when he won 30 Emmys for Boston Legal Public whatever. And so it's that kind of thing that voters like, and we know they like the normal heart. They nominated practically everyone from the cast. They nominated it 16 times. So I don't underestimate him. I'm sort of worried about him. I've been considering moving him into first place because he's up against a very cool operator in Billy Bob Thornton. And again, like I said before, that kind of subdued performance isn't a typical winner.
I'm really torn on this category. I think we've all narrowed it down to three, but what will Emmy voters go with? According to Gold Derby's overall racetrack odds, Billy Bob Thornton is in first place. Mark Ruffalo is in second, and then Martin Freeman. So, the overall odds are kind of agreeing with our individual picks. And then there's Cumberbatch in fourth, Ejiofor in fifth, and Idris Elba in sixth. All right. Do you guys have any final thoughts on this category here? It's a good one, huh?
Based on winners from last year, where they went with the loud speeches every time, I don't see how Mark Ruffalo doesn't win this. But I do have him in third just because I feel like I've been hearing quite a bit about how not everybody is a fan of that performance. So it might be naive to think that, but I would think that if it's somewhat divisive, then he should be able to get pulled down in the average score, and then Billy Bob will take it. Also helping Mark Ruffalo is that he actually, he's giving a lead performance, whereas Billy Bob Thornton and Martin Freeman, I would actually consider them supporting like the Modern Family people. Like in most of these 50-minute episodes, they had only about 10 to 20 minutes of screen time, which is not typically what you would get for someone like Bryan Cranston or Matthew McConaughey in a drama episode. Then again, if voters are only watching the first couple episodes, then that'll help Billy Bob Thornton and Martin Freeman because they have a lot of screen time at the beginning before Alison Tolman and Colin Hanks really flesh out, and they spend more time with the hitman and other people like that.
And Daniel, do you have any final thoughts here?
Just that I'm worried as always. Again, this is the category of Barry Pepper, so that envelope is going to be opened, and I'm just gonna Barry Pepper again. They're going to give it to him for the Kennedy, and you never know. You never know the surprise write-in, but So when I say someone is a front runner in this category, there's a voice in the back of my head saying, but remember. So all bets are off sometimes.
I think I'm just gonna flip a coin. Maybe get a three-sided coin and flip it, and that will be my final prediction. Because they could go either way here, but I think it's between those three. All right, so we'll be back with our next one very shortly.